Welcome back to Stu Structures. I am Mark Stewart and we're here for video number 4 in the building of the freight station, so stay tuned. Okay, I am Mark Stewart, this is Stu Structures, and I am your favorite ferroequestrianologist. So we're going to continue, like I said, on with the build of the freight station from the B&O Railroad in Grafton, West Virginia, the area that I am wanting to model a layout after eventually. And when this is video 4, we've got a good start on the building. We've got all 4 walls and the triangle end of all the brickwork for the lower part of the structure cut. We got the windows and doors cut into 2 long walls. So in this video we need to get the 2 end walls, the windows and doors cut out of those. There's also some extra plastic since I decided to build out the walls from these flats versus doing relief panels. It's going to change how the corners meet. Now remember, I originally cut 45s on those long panels as I made them, and the end panels too, to come together to form corners. But since we're adding relief to the outside of those now, it's going to have to extend beyond that so that the ones coming in from the side panels can meet that, because now you have thicker plastic on both walls forming a corner. So what I'm going to have to do is cut back 1 width of that plastic off the length of all 4 walls, and then when I put on my extra panels on the outside of those, they'll stick out that 1 width of plastic, and then the 45s will go on those, and then those will meet to form the corner, and that will give me all of my correct dimensions for the end walls and the long walls on the front and back as well. So as you go through and you're scratch building some of these buildings, things change as you go through. I mean, you saw me in my last video experimenting with some things to figure out how I'm going to do it, because things are not always obvious as to how you need to tackle a particular job that you're working on for a building. A lot of times it's trial and error. The archways I had never done before, and if you missed that in the last building or the last video, you can go back and see how I'm experimenting with the brickwork over the doors and windows. There's a standing brick in the arches across the tops of the doors, but then there's the ends of bricks that stick out in a row above that are like 2.5 by 2.5 inches, with a slight round, almost a rivet looking thing right in the middle of them that protrudes even with those bricks. Kind of an ornamental row of brick above the normal standing brick. So anyway, it's just something I have never done before, so it's an experiment. So that's why I keep saying, just jump out there and build some buildings and learn. I'm still learning. You can never know it all, I don't think. Every time I come into a new building, I'm learning new things and figuring things out. That's what it's all about. It's just taking the time to do that. So we're going to take the time right now to do that, and we're going to jump into the 4th video of this build and get started. So let's go. The first thing we really need to finish is laying out and cutting out the walls for the ends of the building. In the previous video I did the long side walls, the track side and the back, but we need to lay this out on plastic and start cutting out all these end walls as well. So the first thing I do is I just lay this drawing out in front of the plastic that I'm working on, and use my HO scale rules and just transferring all the upright lines to this with my scale rule to make sure they're right. And these don't always line up with brick edges and stuff, and if you want all your openings to be exact, just make sure that you put those all in place exactly where they need to be. Then I use this square just to continue those lines clear up through the entire sheet of brick. I come back like I did in the previous video and lay out the arches for the openings and everything, and then I have a finished product here, and I'm ready to start cutting out plastic. Now remember, these were the plastic's kind of brittle, so I'm not doing everything, a tiny little detail. I'm coming back and cutting out these main openings with an X-Acto. Then I came through with my Dremel here and a stone on the end and melted through some holes for the nibbler. And then I took this nibbler and I nibbled out the rough openings for the panels. And then I come back with an X-Acto knife and get everything really close to the lines, but not exact. I don't want to overcut. And then I take these files, the round file for the arches and the flat file for the straight edges, and just clean up all those edges because I can do it really fine there. Now remember, I was talking about how the corners are going to overlap now as opposed to the way I had originally planned to build this building, and this is kind of a drawing of that. So you can see the two main walls that I've cut out, and then there's these two pieces now that will set out on the outside of that build up the layering on those corners. So if I had left the 45s on the original plastic, those would have came and met, and these outside corners would have been a lot wider than what they're supposed to be on the building. And you know, I want all these uprights in the building to be, you know, the same size, so I don't want awkward ones on the corner. The corners are already 2.5 feet versus 2 foot where the rest of the opening or the uprights are on the building, so I don't want to extend these anymore. So I'm having to cut back the plastic in the main walls and then add this 2.5 foot plastic to the outside of those, which will come out and meet with the 45s on the corner to give me, you know, the final overall dimensions for the building the way it needs to be. So I need to come back and cut some off the end of each of the walls to shorten these walls to do the overlaps with the brick. And the end walls, I'm going to take 2 thicknesses of the plastic off of, and this long wall I'm going to take 1 layer of plastic off of. And then the end walls will set back in behind the long walls when I glue them together, and that'll give me the proper dimensions for the corner plastic. And normally I like going ahead and building out the walls before I attach them, but I think in the case of this building it's going to be easier to add all the layers with the walls glued in place. So I come back and use my squares and you know, glue 2 sets of walls together, and then come back and glue all 4 of these walls together as a complete basic structure to work from. Now we need to take a look at all the layers that have to be added on here. You can see the door panels are just one big square overlay, and then there's 2 foot sections between the window panels, and on these corners there's 2.5 foot panels that will be overlaid onto that basic layer that we put together. So what I'm going to do is start with a basic strip all the way around the top, because that band wraps completely around the entire building, and then come back and do all the 2 foot panels and 2.5 foot panels that come up to that band, and then we'll come back and do all the door panels separately after we get done with that. And that should give us plenty of structural strength to these walls to make it easier to handle and start working with doors and other detail stuff at that point. So what I'm going to do is just go into all those pieces that I had left over from the last building that I built, and look for pieces that I can cut plastic from, so I'm not wasting, you know, big full sheets of plastic. And I come back with those real long section you see there, and I start cutting the bands to do that upper band all the way around the building. And these are a total of 7 bricks tall, so I just come and cut 4 of these, which is enough to wrap completely around the building. I go ahead and file down 45-degree ends on one end of each of those 4, and then I start gluing them on by doing the long strip on 2 sides of the building first, because I need the long strip doesn't completely do one side of the building, so I'm going to have to add a short piece out. And then once those 45s are you know, out past the ends, then I can come back and cut the end top pieces to match real tight back in behind those, so that the 45s have good snug corners on them. Once I get those first 2 sides done, I mean, this is just the view of both sides. And then once I get both sides and the 45s are sticking out, you see here on the end, then I can work and put a 45 on the end of another long piece and clamp it into place to get an exact measurement and cut it off to length, and then file a 45 on the other end and put it in place. And you know, I just keep playing with it. I usually cut them just a little long and work them down into size so I don't get it too short, and then glue them and clamp them in place. And then once the clamps come off, we have the first part of the layer that goes on the outside of that wall in place. And this actually gives a good bit of stability to the walls so they're not as flimsy as well. And then I start cutting all these uprights that come up to meet that. There's several that are 2.5 foot on the corners, and then there's a bunch that are 2 foot wide. So I just start cutting out all these pieces, and then I also cut out some 12.5 foot wide pieces that are where the doorways are. And these are just those pieces just laying in place to give you an idea of how all those will kind of glue on to the side. And the doorways, I'm just going to clamp those in place and etch through the doors behind so that I can match up the doors to cut the doors out to match the panel behind. And then, you know, that'll give us those panels all finished too. And we'll go through that as we do them. So we're going to start out here by first clamping one of these door panels in place. Now I left these really long, and I'm just going to come back with an X-Acto knife once it's clamped exactly where it needs to be and mark the doors and the bottoms of the leads so that I can go ahead and cut out this main opening. And I just use an X-Acto to cut out the main opening, and then I you know, come back with my nibbler to work on the archway for these. That way I can save these little pieces to use for other projects later on, whether it's chimneys or small containers, whatever. But then once I have all that done, I just, you know, I come back and I glue it into place. And I, you know, I clamp it down because I want good adhesion between these. And the opening is a little rough yet, so I'm going to end up having to come back and file these. I left that on purpose. And I just go on down the line then, and I put in one of those 12-foot pieces and the next door piece. And then, you know, I've got 2 more pieces down here beyond that to go ahead and glue in. And then I have a final piece. And you can see all these long pieces that do extend off the bottom, so I've got to come back and cut those off and then just use a file where all the edges are double plastic. I just got to file them all so that, you know, they look like one thick piece of plastic and not 2 pieces. And once all that's done, we have a finished product. I did, you know, kind of loosen up. One of these door ends just didn't glue in place. So I had to come back and re-glue it and clamp it. But basically, that's one side of the layering done. And just a kind of a trick that helps some seams meet up. Where all these panels are meeting that top piece that I put on originally, you know, sometimes you just don't have exact perfect cuts in plastic. And one of the things that helps these to meet up top and bottom is just to sand the top edge with a slight bevel, and that helps it meet up a little better. Now the other thing I'm experimenting with are these brick dental work to see how I can get enough layers and widths and everything to do those. Now whether I make one and mold them or whether I actually build all of them in place, I'm not sure yet. I haven't made up my mind. But, you know, I have this real thin sheet of brick. The brick is slightly larger than the brick on the Walters plastic that I'm using for the main structure, so I don't think I'll probably use this brick sheet. And just coming back with that real thin plastic sign, I just started adding layers to see if it would work out, but it's a little thick for what I want to do. So it's just another part of the building that I'm going to have to experiment with to, you know, come up with a way to do it to make it work. So there you have another Stu Structures. The building is really starting to take form now, and we can see what it's going to look like. We can see how deep those relief panels are. I think those will work and give really a good visual, well, a good look to what we were trying to do, even though they're not as thick as what they were on the original buildings. I think they're going to look really good. We still have to play around with the archways and with that brick dental work above the window panels. See, I started experimenting with that. Hopefully in the next video we can come up with answers to both of those 2 problems. There's also another little brick detail that we've got to look at making, and I probably will mold those. But in any case, we got to start looking at the second story before long, how we're going to add that on, and then the roofs to the building. We have all the platforms to put on there, so we've got a long ways to go with this building yet. I do like where it's going, but you know, it takes a while to do one of these. So anyway, I want to thank you for coming back and sharing this time with me on my channel, keeping up with my videos. Like and share these. There's a lot of people out there that would like to have this information and don't really know that it exists out here. So share it with friends in the hobby. Also subscribe to the channel. There's a little red button below this video. If you punch it, you're subscribed to my channel, and there's a little bell next to that. If you touch on that, you'll also be notified each time a new video comes up. I've been trying to get these out every Friday. You know, this one's going to come out on time as well. But you know, as my life is really hectic, I don't know how long that's going to continue. So you know, I'm going to do my best to get these out every week as I have been. But we'll see what happens with life. Life comes first. You know, that's just the way it is. And in any case, if you know, hope you learned something from this video. If nothing else, just to jump out there and scratch build some buildings. Find some materials. You can find boxes from cereal laying around your house and build buildings. There's tons of things in the world you can use to experiment with to build buildings for your railroad that are really unique and nobody else will have. So just jump out there and start learning and playing and doing. Things that work for you might not work for me. You know, everybody has his own techniques, his own tools. You use tools probably a little different than I do as far as some respects. So you know, it's kind of a personalized thing. You know, just experiment and learn. Don't take somebody's word for it. I mean, some things are obvious you can and cannot do. But you know, learn for yourself and jump out there and build some of these and enjoy your trains. Going into summer, people kind of get away from the hobby a little bit more and do more things outside. But just every evening before you go to bed, sit down and play a little bit and enjoy the hobby, and happy model railroading.